All right, let's talk some Derek Carr. Let's talk some Las Vegas Raiders. I find these types of videos fascinating. If this is the first you've seen, basically what I'm doing is I'm looking at a quarterback and just trying to figure out their numbers and sort of their splits given specific things and how that ranks up with the rest of the NFL. And I think there's a lot we can learn about this, and we can also learn a lot about the way these quarterbacks are used. So plan on making a few of these, maybe a few of these a week until the end of the season, just because I do find them very interesting. And got to do Derek Carr here because one of the more unique things about Derek Carr is why has there been this drop off with Carr and the Raiders? And also just how good is Derek Carr? Is he a great quarterback? Is he getting used improperly? Well, I think we can actually find some answers to those questions looking at the data. So the first thing I want to do is talk about how well he does in terms of distance down the field. So here we go. So just so you know how this chart works, at the top you see there's distance. So the row below that's how far down the field it is in terms of yards. Obviously, what other metric would we be using? So 20 plus yards down the field, into 10 through 19 range, into 0 through 9 range, and then behind the line of scrimmage. Over to the right, this is where Derek Carr ranks in terms of each categories. So Pro Football Focus grade, passer rating, and then finally percentage of snaps that he throws the ball in those areas. So for example, using the top row, 20 plus yards down the field, he is the best in football according to PFF. In 20 plus yards down the field, he has the 12th best passer rating in terms of those throws, and they do it the 8th most in the NFL, and just in relative to how many snaps that Carr has taken. So looking down this list, you then go one spot below. They're better even in terms of passer rating in that section, so they perform a little better in that area. Carr isn't quite best in football, but he's third best in football, so still very good. Although the percentage of snaps they throw it in that section is just nowhere near high enough. Only 28th most in football, despite the fact that Carr is, PFF says is third best in football at those plays, and their, actual performance is still 10th best in football. So even if the talent around Carr isn't perfect, probably should be throwing those more. A different thing with the 0 through 9, they kind of, that checks out pretty well, doing a pretty good job because, they're right around where they should be in terms of how often they throw those passes. They're not very great at 0 through 9 passes, so they don't do it very often. That's what you like to see. Although worth noting, it's not a list of 32. I believe it's, these are all going to be somewhere around like 33 to 39 around there. Usually it's around 37. There's some slight differences in certain categories, but in all these things, it'll be around like 37 because it's not per team, it's per quarterback who has played at least 20% of their snaps. Finally, the bottom row behind the line of scrimmage. You could argue this and say, hey, they're only 24th best in terms of passer rating, which is that's how you're actually performing, even though Carr is better than 24th there, but you're still doing it 9th most. Do they need to be better at that kind of stuff? You could make that argument if you wanted to, like should they stop throwing so many screen passes? But the reality is screen passes, whether you're good or bad at them, the ending value is always going to be relatively similar. So I don't really take that much stock into that. I think that's fine. To me, the biggest thing we learned from this chart is, hey, throw the ball in that 10 to 19 range more. And to me, I put most of this on coaching. But if you wanted, you could put some on Derek Carr himself. Throw the ball down the field more. Don't take checkdowns as often. I think this next chart is to me, this is the catalyst of this is why we've seen the offense kind of not look as dominant as it looked early on in this year, and why Carr was an MVP candidate, and now people are saying should the Raiders move off of Derek Carr, which granted people have been saying that for quite some time now, and I think it's been silly. I think it still is silly, but again, if you find an upgrade, great. But if you don't just get rid of him to get rid of him. So you see when he's blitzed, his PFF grade is 5th best in football, his passer rating 17th best in football, and the percentage that he gets blitzed is the 27th most in football. So he doesn't get blitzed very often, but when he does, he's very good, although the passer rating maybe not so spectacular. Whereas when he's not blitzed, you see his PFF grade drops a lot. He's not as good when teams drop back and play coverage. However, the passer rating actually, according to, where it ranks, is higher than it is when he is blitzed. And also, teams don't blitz him that much because early on this season, he was crushing the blitz and they were crushing the blitz. The passer rating was way higher. And part of me thinks that this is maybe the drop-off. Carr was one of the biggest disparities between when he got blitzed, he would do great. Now they're blitzing less, but he's also not performing as well against the blitz. Both are true, and to me, this is a clear example of the Henry Ruggs thing has clearly impacted them, because Ruggs was always a threat where you didn't want to leave him one-on-one against a blitzing situation because he does have that speed. Deshaun Jackson has done some nice things, but he hasn't filled that Henry Ruggs-sized hole, quite frankly. That's my theory on it from what the data says. The data is the data. We can't argue the data, but we can argue how we interpret it, and that's how I interpret it. This next one's also, I think, interesting to me. This kind of goes to another, like, a coaching situation where, play action. So they're really good with play action. PFF grade 5th best in football for Carr, 5th best passer rating, and I kind of like looking at passer rating a little bit more when talking about the coaching, because that's the actual impact you're having on the play. You don't really care about how good your quarterback is, you care about how good your team is. But they have the 5th best play action in terms of passer rating, but they use it, Carr is the 32nd most likely to use it. So it's out of 37, again, not out of 32, but that's still way too low on the list. They need to start using play action more. And the flip side is, when they don't do play action, they're not as good. I mean, they're not horrible, they're mediocre, but they do that, obviously. If you're not going to run play action a lot, that means you run plays without play action a good chunk. They need to start running play action more. That's those two tricks, those two simple fixes right off the bat can be a huge way for the Raiders offense to do better. Run play action more and work that 10 to 19 range more, which those two things kind of go hand in hand a little bit, because a lot of times play action goes there. Finally, this is another interesting one. So, you look at so what the chart is when you throw it less than 2.5 seconds, or when it takes you more than 2.5 seconds to throw the football. 2.5 seconds, that tends to be when the play lasts. Like before 2.5 seconds, that's when typically the play is working. After 2.5 seconds, it comes down to, can you make something happen on your own? And what's, again, interesting about this is the PFF grade, very different. They say he's very good when he's getting rid of the ball quickly, but when he has to make something happen, not that great. However, the passer rating ends up being almost equal. So the results are still almost the same, which I don't know exactly what to make of that. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's just randomness and that's all it is. Or maybe it is, in fact, the fact that, they've gotten, unlucky when it comes to throwing the ball quickly, or very lucky when Carr kind of, takes a little bit of time and then chucks one up. I don't know. I don't know what exactly to make of that. But I found that just to be an interesting statistic as well. And again, that's really all I think about with these things. Is I just think they're interesting. I know that some people absolutely hate this stuff and say you should never look at numbers. It's all about tape. And I think there's a lot you can learn from tape. But I also think there's a lot you can learn from numbers. And the best way to do it is to look at a blend of these two things. Because I think that looking at this, couple great takeaways just from doing this is you can say, okay, probably should run some play action more. That seems like a good idea, I would say, and probably should throw the ball in between the 10 and 19 yard lines, which again, running play action will make that even better. And it also should help that 0 to 9 range where, they don't do that very much and they're not very successful at it. Well, maybe if you run play action more, you'll be more successful at it. And, the fact that they throw the ball deep a solid amount, that's good. Like, keep doing that. Like, all that stuff's good. So you kind of learn some ways there. Maybe you can do a little bit less screen passes. I think that's also a fair thing to say. But as a whole, the real thing is, hey, maybe get a receiver who can, beat man coverage more. Because when teams have blitzed you, you just haven't been as dominant as Carr has been throughout his career. So the fact that those numbers have gone down, historically he crushes the blitz. This year hasn't quite been the same. He's still performing great, but the overall outcome hasn't been the same. That's something that you can't fix that this year, unfortunately, but maybe in the future you can fix. So yeah, interesting stuff. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.